Hi, welcome to TVSET. We are coming to you live on November 18, year 2012. And I'm Jim Rathall, and I'm here with my co-host, Jeff Gerritsen. And we're going to be talking to you about a subject that we have discussed ever since we met.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we met at a peak oil conference up in Spokane about how many years ago?
2005, wasn't it?
2005, yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And at that, I love to tell a story, at that conference, there were two groups of people. There were the group of people that were sitting in, listening to the lecturers, absorbing everything the lecturers were having to say, and then there were the people that were out in the hall, shaking their heads and muttering and saying, no, that's not right. Why are they saying these things? Because I was out in the hall going, no, this is not right. Why? And Jeff was one muttering, why? Why are they saying these things? So the topic of tonight's show is going to be peak oil, and Jeff, you and I have discussed this so much between ourselves and with other people that it's easy to forget that there are a lot of people that don't understand what peak oil actually means, and a lot of people, when they hear it, that means that we've run out of oil. So how would you explain to somebody that had not heard the term before what peak oil means?
Peak oil basically means that we've reached the maximum amount of extraction possible.
In other words, no more oil can be extracted?
No, the rate of extraction will not increase. We've peaked at the extraction rate, and from here on out, the rate of extraction will begin to diminish over time.
Okay, so you don't mean the maximum extraction has been reached, but you mean the maximum rate of extraction, because we've grown used to the amount of oil that's being pumped out of the ground is ever increasing, and our needs have ever increased to consume this oil.
Oil production peaked roughly about 2005 at 75 million barrels a day. From that point on, we've been in kind of this undulating plateau going up, but it looks like we're dropping about 1 million barrels a day. In crude oil production, we're making up the difference with refinery processing gains, non-conventional sources, but we're still up around 84, 85 million barrels a day.
Okay.
But that, over time, probably starting sometime 2014, 2015, we're going to start an irreversible decline.
Okay. So Jeff and I have brought a couple of reports that we wanted to discuss between each other, and also to discuss with you, our viewers. And the report that I brought in is one that's from the United Kingdom, and it's a fresh report, and it talks about the economic, largely about the economic aspects of peak oil and what that will mean. And Jeff, yours is more on a probably more on a physics standpoint.
This is actually more on a physical, societal point of view, and it blends those two tangents or graph points together quite nicely.
Okay, so for the folks at home that are watching this show, before we dig into the meat of the material that we have, why should they care about this?
Everything we do, from what we eat to what we play, we work, every aspect of our life revolves around energy. Economies don't run on money; they run on actually run on energy. More specifically, net energy. That amount of energy we have left over after the energy is used to get that oil or whatever out of the ground.
Okay. So it looks like I'm getting clipped into a newer, louder mic.
So
I'm going to leave all this junk hanging on right here for now, and then during cartoon time I'll make it pretty. So okay, let's make sure that I'm being heard. Control room, can you give me thumbs up? If okay, we got the big thumbs up.
Got the big thumbs up. So basically. Okay. Everything.
Why people should care?
Why should they care? Because their whole standard of living, their whole lifestyle, everything, even from going to the Saturday afternoon ball game, is preferenced on how much net energy or how much available energy we have to spend on those functions of society.
It takes a while to kind of wrap your brain around this, because we're so, the energy that comes from fossil fuels comes at us from so many different directions. I heard a mom, the first time she heard about this, then her first reaction was, how am I going to pick up the kids at school? Is that a valid? That is valid.
Or I've heard other reactions, well, I'll just get an electric vehicle and that'll solve all of our problems.
There we go. Yeah.
Don't realize that in order to make that electric vehicle, you need so much energy, you need so much crude oil.
And to charge it up.
And to charge it up. And also for each tire on that electrical vehicle, electric vehicle, you need so much crude oil to make that tire.
And the plastic
and
to
the
make
plastic.
the dash. And
it
paint
goes on and on. This is what I mean by net energy.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this is, if any of you are watching the show and are really taken by this topic, sometime, not during the show, but sometime later perhaps, go to a computer and just type in peak oil, P-E-A-K-O-I-L, and in Google, and just hit return and make sure you're sitting down in a chair before you start reading.
You will be inundated with millions and millions of references.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so I'm going to start off talking about the piece that I saw here, and not now, but I'm going to be calling for slide number 22 in just a little bit, but I'll give you a little bit more warning when slide number 22 is required. But part of this, and Jeff, I think you're going to go into more detail, has to do with the standard of living that we enjoy has to do with the fact that we are able to get energy for not much money. That's the whole thing. That's why we do all this. That's why we have the deep sea platforms drilling for oil. That's why we had oil wells in Oklahoma and Texas and
Southern California.
And Southern California is because it was, you know, for not too much money, you could get a lot of energy out. And so it was the inexpensive energy that made so many things possible, that made the, you know, basically the Industrial Revolution possible. So the first slide that I would like to show is slide number 22. Could we bring that one up just briefly? Slide number 22.
On its way. There we go.
All right. Okay, so hang on to that one for a while. Okay, slide number 22 is a slide of the prices of oil in different countries, and that's how much it costs for a barrel of oil. When I was growing up, oil was maybe $4, $5, $6 a barrel, and it's not just because of inflation that it's become more expensive. It's because a lot of the really easy to get oil, or the low-hanging fruit, has already been taken away. Up there in Canada, you can see in the tar sands, the cost of a barrel of oil now is between $70 and $90. That's not real cheap. Brazilian deep sea oil is between 60 and 80 bucks. The average price is a little bit lower. And U.S. shale oil is between 50 and 70 bucks a barrel. Oil from Colombia is a real bargain at 40 to 60 bucks a barrel. So we would really like to see that relationship with Colombia continue.
And it's closer to get. It doesn't have to be shipped near as far.
That's a good point. That's a real good point. And so so these prices can fluctuate from time to time, but in my life I've seen them all go up. All continuing to go up.
The trend lines go. You know, a really interesting graphic to complement this would be number 29.
Okay. Okay, if we could bring up
number 29.
Number 29. Well, let's keep going until they give us the thumbs up.
Give us thumbs up.
Before, tell me what this graphic is going to be about.
Number 29 overlays oil prices against known recessions and what it does to economic activity.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, because okay, here we have that. We have that slide.
This is since 1975.
Okay.
The gray bars are actual recessions. Those are classic definitions.
So it looks. Let me see if I'm seeing this right. It looks like just about every time there's been a rapid increase in oil price, there's been a recession. In fact,
Right.
almost every time.
And there's another point that this slide brings out, which
Mhm.
also comes into cost.
Yeah.
Is if you notice back in the 80s
Mhm.
and the 70s, we didn't, when we had recessions, you didn't see these wild spikes in oil prices.
Yes.
Okay, that was because the cost of the economic cost of energy, which is the money used to buy energy
Mhm.
divided by your GDP,
Mhm.
was about 5%.
Oh.
As the cost to get energy, the deep sea stuff and everything, as that grew, and when that economic cost gets around 10 to 13%, you start seeing these wild fluctuations like we saw in 2008, 2009.
That's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point. So there seems to be a trigger there that happens.
10% when the cost of oil for a country approaches about 10% of its GDP. At that point, it'll plunge you into a recession, and you'll see these wild price swings. You'll see wild
Wow, very
impacts.
interesting. Okay, so as long as we're on this, I'm going to be calling for slide number 21 in just a few minutes, but I wanted to set it up first. The next slide that I want to show you, Jeff, is very interesting because this report that I've been reading here talks about various economies, like the U.S. economy and say the economy of some countries that are not so well developed, and as developed as we are, for instance, China, for instance, and how sensitive their economies are to changes in oil price. And this report that I'm reading here suggests that the United States, that isn't as much of a production nation as it once was, is not real tolerant of changes in the price of oil because we are not making as much money from a barrel of oil as we once were. But China, on the other hand, is making a very large amount of money from their energy investments. And so if the price of oil goes up for them, they can stand it because they're making so much money off of that barrel of oil. So do we happen to have slide number 21 available? Okay, Jeff, take a look at this guy here. This is pretty interesting. Let me see if I can, here you go, here's my, here it is in this book for you to glance at. But what that is showing us is the line that is relatively, oh gosh, what it's indicating is that there are certain, as the price of oil climbs, certain economies react to it very heavily. The one that's reacting with the big up and the big down would be like the U.S. economy, and the one that has only a smaller blip up and blip down would be a less developed economy, like, for instance, China. So that's very interesting. So that means that we, as a nation, are in a kind of a perilous position with regard to fluctuations in energy prices.
We are in a perilous position because we have built a society that requires enormous amounts of energy to run.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, look at our major transportation form of long-distance transportation is airline.
Yeah.
Airlines are slightly more efficient than the personal automobile. So we've got a living arrangement called suburbia, which is very energy intensive. These are choices that we made early in the last century.
In the midst of abundance of oil.
In the midst of the 30s, when we were awash in cheap oil.
Right. And in fact, it was interesting to me as I studied the history of all this that in that period that you're describing in America, that we were we held a position that is similar to what Saudi Arabia has held. In other words, we were the world's greatest exporter of oil and of petroleum energy to the world, and it brought in huge amounts of money into our country, which made us tremendously prosperous and very able to indulge ourselves in warfare because
we indulged ourselves in warfare, and then it became a habit. Then it became an addiction, because then we had to wage war to control energy resources. And by controlling these energy resources, we could direct and plunder other economies to our benefit. Hence,
kind of reminds me of the Romans a little bit.
yeah, we're kind of we're kind of an latter-day Roman Empire.
Because they were grabbing slaves, bringing them back to Rome, forcing them to work in the silver mines to make silver coins to pay the soldiers to go out and get more slaves.
Well, look what we're doing in the Gulf now. Our military patrols the Gulf.
The Persian Gulf, yes.
To keep it free of terrorist activity or whatever, so we can ensure the flow of oil. And that's a cost that's been externalized to the citizens of the United States because the oil companies are not charged for our military patrolling those waters.
Yeah, and we as citizens get, quote, cheap oil, but we pay for it on the back end in our taxes, and
that's why our defense budget is approaching $1 trillion.
Right. Wow.
So.
Okay. Well, let's see. Where are we in the show? We are. It's about time for a little levity. We would like to go to roll-in number 1 if we are ready for that, so I can get my microphone all straightened up.
Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's newly frugal guy, here to warn you of the fiscal cliff. It all started back when I, newly frugal guy, and my newly frugal Hoxketeers helped create the fiscal cliff to teach you the evils of deficit spending. With the spendocrats, we had to threaten you with absolute destruction, so you cut the deficit we're now warning you against cutting. You see, citizens, the cliff would dramatically cut the deficit, but it would do so by cutting Pentagon spending, which, through the mysteries of newly frugalness, is huge government spending that is amazingly not socialistic. We all know true deficit reduction can only come from cutting pinko social programs like schools, health, and welfare. The fiscal cliff also threatens to blow up the Bush tax cuts, and devious spendocrats want taxes for the rich to return to what they were during the dark days of Clinton, back when the economy was, well, never mind. Newly frugal guy will fight to ensure the spendocrats finally become more moderate. They agree never to raise taxes on the rich and adopt the tax policy of the great recently losing party by closing unnamed loopholes and deductions. Then we will be on our way to fighting the deficit with a newly frugal bipartisan future for all. Newly frugal guy. Free market, ho! Ho! Oh, cut!
Hi, I'm Naomi Klein, author of The Shock Doctrine, and you are watching TVSET Aiding and Abetting the Progressive Community since 1991.
Alrighty, thank you for coming back and joining us. And those of you who just tuned in, my name is Jim Rathall, and Jeff Gerritsen is here with me, and we are discussing the topic of peak oil, which is can be defined in many ways, but basically it means when the rate of production of oil reaches a point that it cannot keep going up anymore and begins to level off, and that's called peak oil. And it doesn't mean that we've run out of oil. It just means that the oil supply has quit increasing. And then after that peak, there follows a sort of a fall off. And we're talking about not just U.S. oil, because it happened in the U.S., mainland U.S. in 1970. We're talking about world oil.
And why is it that we have to have continuing growing supplies of energy?
Yes, there's the growth issue, isn't there? Yeah, let's talk about growth a little bit.
We seem to have an economic system that requires growth.
Yeah, no, you know, it's interesting. During it was around 1860, 1850s or 60, somewhere around there, that the industrial production of oil began in the United States, and it soon spread to other parts of the world. And there were various kind of forms of business that had been set up prior to this, and to do things like explore new lands, new uninhabited areas like the North American continent and the South American continent where no one was living, and so it came to have a name. They called it capitalism. It finally took on the name capitalism, and it was a dandy form of government, or excuse me, not government. I'm merging these. A dandy form of economics for exploiting resources, exploiting unused areas, exploiting oil, exploiting coal,
exploiting labor.
Exploiting labor, yeah. At the same time, there were some reactionary, I guess you could say, or compensatory economic systems that came into being, like socialism, which had another look at how to deal with distribution of wealth. But all of these different systems were brought into being in a time of expanding energy supply. And so the scenarios that we're talking about today at this time are scenarios where the energy supply is no longer expanding, but is leveling off at best and going into decline
at worst.
At worst, yeah.
So with that, that's the $64,000 question: is how do you do a managed contraction?
That's really a tremendously good question, because the system that we have right now is based on perpetual growth and loaning money. You know, people are glad to lend money. I would be glad to lend you money in a period of perpetual growth, for you to invest it in something that was going to grow, and you could pay me back with interest. So I would be rewarded for risking loaning you money. Great. But when there's a contractionary energy supply going on, if I loan you money, it's probably going to come back smaller.
So you don't get your rate of return.
So you don't get your rate of return. So so that is a problem. That is a problem. Is this something that you've thought about, Jeff?
Well, I've thought about it. I'm working with a person up in Vancouver, Canada.
Okay.
He's written a book about economics and revolution and so forth. And what he is proposing is that we go ahead and define capitalism in two components. One is the logic of capitalism, and the other is the institutions of capitalism. The logic of capitalism is manipulated once and profit. The institutions are the supply chains, the markets, and so forth. And he says we can change out the logic from manipulated once and profit to sustainable well-being, and over a period of time evolve the institutions of capitalism to meet the new logic. This is one thing. I mean, all these studies we're talking about and they're all reaching the same conclusion. What do we do? They're all scratching their heads going, okay, how do we keep this project called civilization going?
Project called civilization, that's good. Yeah, I mean, because there have been times in history before when energy supplies have contracted.
Well, the collapse of Rome, because they couldn't get wood.
The collapse of Rome, yes.
And also they had collapses. I think the Mayans and the Incas collapsed when they couldn't grow enough food. Easter Island folks collapsed because they cut down all their trees. That was their main source of energy and what they used to build their boats and so forth. So they go into these long periods of contraction.
Yeah, Easter Island stayed contracted.
Stayed contracted, the most recent. Probably the Roman Empire, the most studied. But basically the energy which they ran their societies and cultures on went into contraction, and they could no longer build their empires and keep going.
Okay, now I know that your report dealt heavily with a theory called EROEI, or return on energy. So
energy returned on energy invested.
Okay. So basically what that means in business, you just call it ROI, return on investment. So I'm, you know, I invest some money in something, and how much you know do I have coming back? So does that more or less fit your definition?
Pretty close.
Okay.
Pretty close. There are, getting into this one, there are levels of return on energy return you need to sustain certain aspects of society.
Okay. Okay, so let's just say, let's just see how this works out.
Okay.
I mean, so you have a slide there.
I have a slide. First, I want to develop a little bit more on this idea of net energy. So if we could bring up slide number 28.
Okay, so we're gonna need we're looking for a thumbs up when we've got slide 28. Okay.
Ready.
So tell me what's here we got it.
Here we got it.
Man, things are happening around here.
In slide 28, this shows you just how much is siphoned off as oil is extracted, refined, we use it for transport, and then what is ultimately available to the end consumer.
So tell me what each of these pictures means along the way. So the first one is the oil coming up out of the ground.
Yeah, let's say you've got 100 million joules of energy.
Right, right.
And by the time it goes through the extraction process, the refining process, the transportation process, and this is all those processes that society needs, not only to get the oil to the end consumer as far as transportation, but also to support the infrastructure of transport of our society. So that, say 100 million joules or whatever of energy drops down to about 25 to 28,000 joules of energy at the end. That's
so you start off with 100 and you drop down to 20?
Probably 20,000.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes on in supporting the infrastructure of society. And this is what people don't realize. And I think this graphic defines that really nicely.
Wow. Wow.
So,
I didn't realize, I mean, are these realistic numbers? My God.
And down at the bottom, you see the citations from the study they came from.
Wow. I didn't realize that much was lost along the way.
It's quite substantial.
Huh. So in a situation like this, what would be your EROEI?
We're probably down to around 20 to 1.
But you said that you're starting with 100 units and you're ending up at 25. So where do you get 20 to 1 out of that?
You've also got non-conventional.
Okay. But in this scenario right here,
this
you
is
have
just talking
pictured,
about
the EROEI would be
crude oil. This is probably. I'm having a hard time looking at that graphic, but I'm thinking, well, this is also just talking about the fuel that actually reaches people.
I see.
For transportation.
Okay. All right. All right.
So, and transportation is about 70% of all of our crude oil consumption.
All right. Let's keep going here.
But if we bring up slide number 27.
27. We would like to see if we could get it up there.
Now,
yes.
This,
very good.
This one, for those of you who've taken psychology and understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs, somebody said, what is society's hierarchy of needs of energy? Society's energetic needs.
Okay, let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs before we move on. As I recall, Maslow, this is a pretty popular idea in maybe the 60s and 70s. That was when I heard about it. And so at the very bottom there was like food, clothing, shelter.
Food, clothing, shelter.
If you don't have food, clothing, shelter, there's a lot of other stuff that you can't do. And then beyond that is, do you remember the next levels?
Oh, I think it's emotional needs.
Right, okay. Physical needs first, emotional needs.
And then the community needs.
Probably social needs.
Social needs.
For status and respect. And all that sort of thing.
And it ends up in the top of, what's your self-actualization, what's your goal in life, and so forth.
Right, right.
In this particular chart, what we've done is, the bottom is extracting energy. The next level is refining that energy. And then the transportation of that energy and the transportation for the infrastructure. And then we need a certain energy return on investment to grow food, family support, then to support our education system. And finally, one of the things that defines our culture from previous cultures, we have the arts.
Well, there have been arts around for quite a while.
But it's estimated that in order to support that peak there, you need a minimum return on energy of 14 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's take this back in ancient times. It probably would still hold true. I mean, because they had artists in Egyptian times.
they did.
You know, they probably didn't have oil. They probably were using slaves.
They were using slaves. They were using wind power in their sails. They had agriculture, and they were using wood. And wood can give you up to 20 to 1 return if you don't denude your forest. But we have a history of denuding forests, so there's a brief time where you can get like maybe 50 to 1, then you exhaust or deplete your resource, and then you collapse.
This hierarchy would hold true. It would, maybe the numbers would be slightly different, but it would be approximately true that. All right. So what kind of EROEI do we need for farming, for instance, for agriculture?
About 10 to 1.
10 to 1 at this time, right? Okay.
Given our current industrialization and mechanization of agriculture. Of course, if we were to employ different techniques of agriculture and have more decentralized approach to it, we could probably do a lot more, become a lot more efficient with it. It would become much more resilient. You'd have multiple fallback resources and so forth.
Yeah, so because we're talking about industrial agriculture such as we have here, where we're running tractors, we're using oil for fertilizers and
transportation,
bug spray, distribution.
The average item in your grocery store has traveled 1,500 miles.
Right.
From the start. It's estimated that agriculture uses about 20% of all of our energy consumption.
Okay.
So if you want to go in here, you can get an idea of where these different technologies are.
Okay. What slide?
This would be slide number 26.
If we could bring up number 26, please.
Okay. In this slide, you begin to see the energy return on invested of different technologies. In the upper left-hand corner, you see the oil extraction of 100 to 1 back in the 1930s, and then the oil extraction of today, which we're down to about 20 to 1 around 2010.
I'm surprised it's that high.
Well, that's worldwide.
Yeah.
Worldwide, it's roughly about 20 to 1 right now.
Okay. I thought it had fallen further than that, but that's good to know.
Your deep sea is probably around 7 to 1.
Oh, okay.
So that's what makes that number change. But if you'll notice, there's on these different balloon graphs here, you've got wood there. Wood's anywhere from firewood is probably around 15 to 1. And that's these are fungible numbers. You've got wind that can range anywhere from 20 to 40 to 1.
That's great.
Solar, though, is probably down around 7 to 1 if we're lucky. And of course, where do we see corn ethanol and cellulosic ethanol?
Yeah, right.
They're not even on the graph.
They're so low.
They're like 1.3 to 1.
Wow.
So they're not. It's not capable of supporting our society, and yet we seem to be focusing in on these new technologies that are not going to benefit us. They don't provide enough energy return on invested to give us the society we want to have.
So that huge balloon out there in the middle, it's coal.
Coal.
Right?
Coal is pretty static. It's going to stay there probably till we practically exhaust it. But it's a dirty fuel. Coal is a deal with the devil.
Right. Right.
You pay a high price for that.
The global warming thing. So what's that balloon that's out to the right where it says USA?
That's where we were in 2005. So basically, if we were to rely on all the different combinations of energy available to us provided by photosynthesis, in other words, we could live within our energy budget that the planet provides, we would have to be to the left of that total photosynthesis. But in 2005, we were way over on the right.
Oh, we're beyond photosynthesis.
Yeah, we're
living beyond our means.
We're living beyond our means. Or as farmers would say, we're eating our seed corn.
Right. Okay.
So this is, and I contrast this. So if the previous chart showing this hierarchy, it says we need a certain amount of energy to enjoy the arts. And what I mean by arts is like you want to go to the basketball game, you want to go to the football game,
museums, music,
you name it, the entertainment. That requires a certain energy returned on energy invested or invested amount, so you can continue that.
Okay, this might be a good time for us to take another break. So we have another roll-in. There would be roll-in number 2. If we could bring that up, give us a chance for a breather here.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Can't afford this sort of change. They want you to believe it's a new day and the past is behind us. Forget about jobs, they say, or the billions of dollars in job creation. They want to put a stop to $6 billion in free market activity. That's good for the economy, good for America. If they have their way, one of the fastest growing sectors of our economy is coming to a screeching halt today. Don't let voters stop the campaign. Political spending is America's economic powerhouse. Sure, voters are having their say, but what about the campaigns that stimulated the economy to the tune of $6 billion? The Citizens United stimulus worked. Just ask the thousands of copywriters, political operatives, consultants, video editors, and ad executives now looking for work. Why, independent political groups alone spent $19 million a week in September, $33 million a week in the beginning of October, and $70 million a week by the end of October. Political spending and campaign ads mean jobs. What would this economy look like if voters and a job-killing election hadn't put a stop to the boom? It's time we got America working again. It's time for a perpetual campaign. Paid for by a coalition of political consultants, operatives, copywriters, pundits, national broadcast outlets, and ominous narrators like myself.
We have a plug.
Hello, my name is Alexis Ziegler, author of Culture Change, Civil Liberty, Peak Oil, and the End of Empire. You're watching TVSET, Aiding and Abetting the Progressive Community since 1991.
All right, welcome back.
I love it. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Perpetual campaign.
Perpetual campaign.
So, so Jeff and I are talking. You're watching TVSET. Jeff and I are talking about the topic of peak oil, and that topic means what what are the changes that we can expect if it should ever happen that global oil production stops going up, levels off, and then begins to decline. What might that mean for all of us? And could we go back to that last slide that you were looking at, and let's just finish up with that.
Number 26.
Number 20, what was it?
26.
26?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, there we go. So that explain that part about 2/3 over from the left. It says total photosynthesis. Tell me what that means again.
That is everything that was provided to us by sunlight.
Okay. So are you talking on a planetary level?
Well, this would be all the stuff that was provided by fossil fuels.
Right.
Provided by solar, if we could maximize our use of solar.
Yeah.
Not only photovoltaics, but solar, hot water heating,
yeah.
Windmills, and so forth.
But that line that says total photosynthesis, that refers to if we could harvest all of this photosynthesis energy on the entire planet. In other words, burn every leaf and twig and tree that is growing.
Burn everything.
Burn if we consumed it all. That would be, that's how much energy there would be. And the United States level of energy consumption is way beyond that.
We're about 20 quads beyond that.
Yeah, okay.
And a quad is a lot of energy.
So the deal is how, okay, let me ask you a question. We're alive here, right? We are alive. We've gone way beyond photosynthesis. how can we do this?
How can we come back from the brink?
No, not how can we come back. I mean, how is it that we're able to live so well? Why? I mean, there's trucks whizzing down the highway. I've got this shirt. This happens to be natural fiber, but I'm sure I've got something that's not. Well, I had this pin. It's definitely not.
It's the same way you live on a credit card. There's a period of time when you can have a big party as long as someone is willing to extend you credit.
Okay.
And that's where we're at with the energy credit here.
So where did this energy come from? I'm getting basic no.
Okay, this energy came from photosynthesis. Probably 100 million years ago, there was two major periods of time when most of the hydrocarbons were formed. I think what 100 million years ago, and I'm thinking the other one was 70 million years ago or something like that. The close cataclysmic events that created this, gave us this lottery, one-time endowment, the jackpot of energy. And we figured we'd never burn through it. We figured it would just go on indefinitely.
So in other words, if I may paraphrase what you're saying, the lifestyle that we enjoy as a planet right now, the industrial lifestyle, jets flying around, cars driving here and there, power grid humming,
the internet,
is all from stored sunshine from millions of years ago.
Ancient daylight.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I did a calculation one time, and I might have shared this with you. In other words, if all that energy, and we have now used up about half of it, and we may not be able to get all the rest of the other half, but we've used up about half of this stored energy. And it took many millions of years, somewhere between 170 to 100 million years for that to happen. If every man, woman, and child was to live on the amount of photosynthesis, of energy that is being left behind now, because oil is still forming at an incredibly slow rate. It always has at an incredibly slow rate. But right now, it turns out that every man, woman, and child has forming for them 5 drops
per year.
Per year.
Yes.
So that's.
So we hit the lottery on energy.
Yep.
And we're using it up.
Yep.
And but our real budget is at 5 drops a year.
That's our real of oil. Now,
of oil.
There's other energies.
There's other energies
that we could use.
Yeah.
But let's save that for the end. Okay. So we're at we're around here right now. So we probably want to go to another roll-in so that we'll be more or less on schedule if we could. So we've got 14 minutes. Yeah, let's go to roll-in number 3.
After 7 long years, President Obama formally announced the end of U.S. combat operations in Iraq last night. During his speech, he declared it was time to turn the page and to focus on problems back here at home in the U.S.
As the nation winds down the trillion-dollar war in Iraq, said the president, it must turn its resources to tackle challenges at home, like the economy.
Our most urgent task is to restore our economy.
The United States of America put 20 years of sanctions, invasion, war, and occupation on Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi people are dead, millions displaced. The economy shattered and hijacked. The environment is devastated and will remain toxic for thousands of years. Therefore, it is obscene for U.S. people to now walk away from the disaster they created and then talk of restoring our economy. Where are the apologies? Where are the reparations? Why are U.S. Americans not in Iraq planting new trees, rebuilding homes, or taking care of the suffering? What would be a responsible thing to do in a situation like this. When I grow up, I'm going to be a scientist.
Hi, this is Dar Jamail, author of Beyond the Green Zone. You're watching TVSET Aiding and Abetting the Progressive Community since 1991.
All right, I'm Jim Rathall. My co-host Jeff Gerritsen is here with me. We're talking about peak oil. We're coming down the home stretch, and so Jeff just told me during the break that he has an elevator speech prepared about what we might be able to do about peak oil.
Basically, reality is taking us to a place we don't want to go. We're looking for anything that we can keep the current system going, whether it be renewable fuels, corn ethanol, cellulosic ethanol. But reality says, no, we can't go there. What we need to do is we need to redefine our economic logic, and then we need to make some serious investments in our transportation infrastructure so that it becomes much more efficient.
Give me an example.
Let the airlines go. Let's start investing in bringing our dilapidated rail system back into usability. In 1925, we were the world's leader in mass transit, rail, light rail, and we had people from other countries coming over here to look at us and say, how did you do it? How did you build a system like that? We can employ millions of people in doing that and rebuilding that infrastructure that we have just let die.
It didn't just die.
It was actually killed.
Yeah, it was killed by big corporations.
Big corporations,
but that's
yeah.
another. We're going to do a show on that sometime down the road. But keep going. And
then other investments include investments in shipping. Shipping is, right now we're seeing these great big huge ocean-going container ships, and they figure that the direction is bigger is better. No, smaller is better. Smaller, more efficient.
Closer is better.
Closer is better. More small and medium-sized ports. Building facilities for sailors. Yes, you're going to have those old places we didn't like, and they're going to get some, really rancorous activity, but that's sailing life. The other thing is we need to preserve which capital we have left and not spend it on, for example, here in the Portland area, replacing the interstate bridge with this $4.5 billion boondoggle. We need to spend and take that money and spend it more wisely. For example, a good intermediate solution would be to earthquake or rehab, for a seismic rehab of the existing structure, put another bridge across, bring light rail and the railroad across. Redo the rails bridge so that both the rail bridge and the existing interstate bridge, barge traffic can go in the same direction. It doesn't have to try to jog to get to the center, and that way you won't have so many bridge lifts. If we continue this boondoggle expenditures, we're not going to have the financial capital to rebuild our society. We're going to have to take a look at suburbia and our living arrangement. Suburbia is a write-off. It's a sunk cost, and the best thing we can start doing is looking at other walkable, livable towns. Good way to model that is look at the towns that were popular prior to the advent of the automobile. Downtown Port Townsend is a classic example in Washington.
It's a lovely little town.
Lovely little town. Another good example is the old St. Helens. It has rail, it has small and medium-sized port facilities, and it's surrounded by agriculture, and the downtown is a walkable town. Beautiful. Those would be the new thriving towns. It's just I hope we would have capital to reinvest in those towns that are just waiting to be reactivated.
Yeah, I think along with what you're saying, I think that that the automobile, it's been previously noted that the automobile and the industrial life that we have has been very depersonalizing, and that that people are in their car rolling down the street and they are not in contact and hardly even notice people that may be around them. And I think that the future is going to see people getting out of the cars. I think that it's going to see them getting into buses. They're going to be confronted by people. It's actually going to make, it's going to open up the possibility for conviviality. It's going to open up the possibility for community. And I think that small scale community is going to be restored.
You mean we won't have to text everybody?
Well, no, you could just turn next to your neighbor I'm looking forward to the day when you is spelled with 3 letters instead of 1.
A lot of, as we go forward, a lot more people will begin to make a lifestyle change. They'll begin to make a living in agriculture again.
Yeah.
Agriculture will become much more
It'll have to.
labor intensive. It'll have to, because it won't have the energy inputs available to it. But even before all this begins to happen, and reality is pushing us there, the best thing we can do as a society is have this kind of like the AA moment when you realize that you can't continue the way you're going, and you come to grips with the come to Jesus moment, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
This reality, this admitting to yourself that we can't go this way. And then at that point you begin to pressure your politicians and says, we can't do this anymore. We're going to have to make some changes in society. And that's what these studies, the study that I've talked about, the study you talked about, ultimately they end with a series of recommendations to policy leaders.
Yep. And they're not going to do it on their own. So I would like to say that I wish, because this is our last show before Thanksgiving, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And when you're there with the people you're having Thanksgiving with, look around at them and realize how important those connections are. And when you get back home from your Thanksgiving, look around in your neighborhood and get to know the folks in your neighborhood, because you're going to need them. We've got some interesting times ahead of us. And so I'm Jim Rathall. I want to thank you very much for being here with us, and it's now time for cartoon time.
Dessert.
Yeah. All righty. So we have some interesting cartoons this time. This one is a picture of a bunch of people blasting away at a bird with newspaper wings, and it's from Spain, and it's talking about government control, attempted control of journalism. Spain is going through some huge changes right now. This one is from Canada. It's by a Russian artist living in Canada, and it shows a beggar on the street, and he's begging beneath a sign. It says Whiskas, and the idea is, why is it that so much money is being spent on luxury food for pets and not for the poor? This one from Spain, it says, please give me
alms, I'm the banker.
Give me alms, I'm the banker. So even the bankers,
are hurting.
Are hurting there in Spain. So. This one from Ecuador, this is a heck of a cartoonist. I think this is really beautiful. It's showing, a struggle between the protesters and the cops. The cops has a billy club and a shield, and the protester has a bullhorn and words to protect himself. This one from Poland, very eerie, but I thought I would include it anyway. It says child raising of the future. It shows this sort of a lab with this baby growing in this synthetic environment. It's a little bit creepy, but it makes me wonder where we're headed. This one from Spain again, showing this hourglass and people falling through. The top says employed and the bottom says unemployed, I believe it says.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Jeff's had his rough go with that. This one from Holland, it shows all the animals lined up 2 by 2 heading for a refrigerator. And this is about global warming. What do you think of that?
Heading for the North Pole where they can live.
Yeah, these are some great cartoons. This one, Jeff, this one's from Poland, and it shows a gallows and a hangman's noose, but the hangman's noose is really a businessman's, perhaps a banker's tie. And it's suggesting that we really should punish the bankers that made off with so much money, global wealth. This one from Tanzania, I have a couple from Tanzania, showing Uncle Sam and the premier of China, both reaching for the remote control, and the TV set says the world. They're both struggling for control of the world. This from Italy, it's kind of like an Escher painting, but it's showing you know, birds turning to jets, jets turning to birds, and indicating that we need to work toward peace. This one from Poland, beautiful artwork here. It shows this guy walking along on a radiator. I think this one is another allusion toward global warming. But the artwork on this, I hope it looks good at home, because it really looks great. This one from Canada, and it was talking about the division between countries. So here these guys are at this bridge, barricaded, guns, and their dogs are out in the middle, kind of, well, I guess you could say making whoopee. And this one is from Tanzania again, and it shows the globe being dumped into a hole from this dump truck. And the globe doesn't look too happy about what's about to happen. This one from Ecuador is very interesting. It shows a guy who's supposed to be like a European businessman. He's got a magic lamp. He rubs it, and out comes a genie with a begging cup too. Kind of like, it's like, you know, it's kind of like the West is looking toward Arabian oil, and Arabia oil is going dry too.
Yeah. What is it? Spain has got over 20% unemployment.
20%. Bad, bad, bad.
Can you imagine?
All right. Thank you for joining us.
See you in 2 weeks. I love it.
Isn't that great music?
Love it.